He had everything, a mansion, power, and wealth. But when his daughter's horse became the target of his revenge, he crossed a line no one could ever imagine. His order? To have the horse slaughtered. It was a cruel decision that would haunt him forever. But what happened next, no one saw coming. A horse, a family, and a secret that could destroy everything. Get ready for a story of betrayal, unexpected heroes, and a bond that refuses to break. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a powerful story like this one. The storm raged outside the Westbrook mansion, its fury reflected in the chaos inside. Julian Westbrook stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the stable, his jaw clenched, watching his daughter's most prized possession, Apollo, the magnificent stallion, grazing peacefully in the rain-soaked paddock. The horse, with its strong muscular frame and glossy chestnut coat, was a symbol of freedom and grace. But to Julian, Apollo had become a painful reminder of everything he had lost. Lily, his only child, had been through hell. 2 months ago, a car accident had left her in critical condition, both physically and emotionally. She had fought her way back from the brink, but a part of her had never fully recovered. The accident had taken her mother, and Lily's heart was still wrapped up in the memory of that loss. For months, she had refused to leave the house, refusing to speak to anyone but Apollo. The horse had been a lifeline, a connection to her mother, and Julian could feel the growing distance between them with every passing day. Standing in the shadow of his multi-million-dollar empire, Julian had everything money could buy: wealth, power, success, but he felt powerless when it came to his daughter. The accident had shattered something inside her and he couldn't fix it. Every time he tried, she pushed him further away, and Apollo, Lily's constant companion, was the barrier he couldn't break. Every day she spent in the stable, grooming and caring for the horse, was another day she wasn't trying to move forward. To Julian, it was as if she was holding on to a memory of a life that no longer existed, and that frustrated him more than anything. He had tried everything. Therapy, trips, gifts, but nothing seemed to get through to her. His daughter was lost in her grief, and he couldn't bear to watch it any longer. With his mind clouded by frustration and a desire for control, Julian made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "He needs to go," Julian said to Greg, his trusted assistant, without emotion. Greg, a man who had worked for Julian for years, stared at him for a long moment. He had seen Julian angry before, seen him make decisions without hesitation. But this was different. There was a cruelty in his eyes that unsettled Greg. "Are you sure, sir?" Greg asked, his voice steady but cautious. It's Lily's horse." Julian's gaze hardened. "It's her attachment to that damn horse that's keeping her stuck. She'll never heal as long as she clings to the past. You don't understand, Greg. She's throwing away her life." Greg hesitated, his mind weighing the gravity of the request. But in the end, he knew there was no changing Julian's mind once it was made. "I'll arrange it," he said quietly. "It'll be done by morning." Julian nodded, his mind already elsewhere. His thoughts were consumed with visions of his daughter and her grief. This was the only way. The only way to break her from the past. As Greg left the room to make the call, Julian turned back toward the window. He could see the silhouette of Apollo in the distance, framed by the dark storm clouds above. The horse was beautiful, majestic, and strong. But in that moment, it felt like a symbol of everything Julian had lost: his wife, his daughter's happiness, and his peace of mind. He wanted to fix things. He needed to fix things. And if sacrificing the horse was the only way to do it, so be it. But even as the thought passed through his mind, a strange feeling lingered, one he couldn't shake. It was a cold, gnawing doubt that crept up his spine. He had never been one to second-guess himself, but something about this felt wrong. A knot formed in his stomach as he glanced one last time at Apollo, who was now looking back at him with intelligent, unblinking eyes. Just as he turned to walk away, a faint sound broke the silence. The soft neigh of a horse, followed by the creaking of the stable door. Julian froze. It wasn't the sound of a horse resigned to its fate. No, it was the sound of panic. He rushed toward the door and threw it open, stepping into the downpour. The stable was eerily quiet, save for the heavy rain that lashed against the roof, and then he saw it. Apollo was moving restlessly in his stall, tossing his head as if sensing something was wrong. But that wasn't what caught Julian's attention. It was the figure standing at the edge of the stable, cloaked in the shadow of the overhanging barn roof. Lily. She was standing there, drenched to the bone, her eyes wide with horror as she stared at her father. "You," Julian started, his voice thick with shock. "What are you doing here?" "I won't let you do it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I won't let you hurt him." And in that moment, Julian realized something that shook him to the core. His daughter had known, and she was not going to let him destroy the one thing that meant more to her than anything. Lily's voice echoed in the cold night air, trembling with both fear and defiance. "I won't let you hurt him." Julian stood frozen, his mind racing. His daughter, his little girl, was standing in front of him, her soaked hair clinging to her pale face, her eyes wide with a mix of desperation and determination. It had been months since he had seen her so alive, so aware of the world around her. For so long, she had been a shell of the person she once was, lost in grief and memories. But now, here she was, standing up to him, her hands shaking at her sides, ready to defend Apollo, the one thing that kept her tethered to the past. "You don't understand," Julian muttered, his voice strained. He felt the weight of the storm pressing in on him, both the one raging outside and the one inside his heart. "This isn't about the horse, Lily. It's about you. You need to let go of this, of everything that keeps you trapped in the past." Lily shook her head, the motion fierce and resolute. "You don't get it, do you? Apollo isn't just a horse. He's the last piece of mom I have left, and I'm not going to let you take that from me." Julian's breath hitched. For a moment his hardened exterior cracked, and the raw emotion in Lily's voice hit him like a physical blow. His daughter had lost so much, her mother, her sense of security, her peace, and now she was fighting for the last thread of that safety. But his mind, clouded by frustration, refused to relent. "This obsession is unhealthy," he snapped, his voice laced with a cold, calculated edge. "You're wasting your life, holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore." Lily stepped forward, her face softening for just a moment before the fierce determination returned. "You can't just fix everything by throwing money at it, Dad. I'm not some project that you can fix with a check or a new thing. I need time, I need space, and I need Apollo." For a moment, Julian considered her words. He could feel the cold rain soaking through his suit, the chills in the air seeping into his bones. But none of that mattered. He was no longer thinking about the storm outside. He was thinking about Lily, about the hurt in her eyes, the pain that still clung to her like a second skin. "You're not thinking clearly," he said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "You can't live in the past forever." Lily's eyes flashed, a mix of fury and sorrow in them. "And you think I can just forget her? Forget Mom? Forget the life we had? You've already taken everything else from me. Don't take this, too." The words struck Julian like a punch to the gut. His pulse raced, and for a split second the walls he had built around his heart seemed to crumble, exposing the guilt and regret he had buried deep within. He had tried so hard to protect Lily from the pain of losing her mother, but in the process he had alienated her. He had pushed her away, not knowing how to heal her, not understanding what she needed from him. "Please." Lily's voice was barely a whisper now, but the raw emotion behind it cut through him. "Don't take him from me. I can't lose him too." The words hung in the air between them, thick with the weight of years of grief, anger, and love. Julian's gaze shifted toward Apollo, who stood in the stable, his large dark eyes reflecting the storm. The horse seemed to sense the tension, his ears flicking back and forth as if caught in the middle of something he didn't understand. For a brief moment, Julian questioned himself. Could he really go through with this? Could he really destroy the last connection his daughter had to the woman he had loved? But before he could voice his doubt, the sound of tires on gravel reached his ears. Greg. Julian's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the driveway, his thoughts racing. Greg had likely already made the call. The hitmen would be on their way, the slaughter already arranged. "No!" Lily shouted suddenly, her voice sharp with panic. "No, you can't. He's not some object for you to get rid of. You don't get to control everything." Julian's mind snapped back to reality. He was losing her to the grief he had tried to fight for so long. He had pushed her to this point, and now he was paying the price. "You think I want to control everything?" he asked, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and guilt. "Do you think I wanted this? I just wanted you back. I wanted you to stop hurting, to stop holding on to something that wasn't real anymore." But it was too late. As the distant sound of approaching footsteps reached them, both Julian and Lily turned to face the stable's entrance, where Greg appeared in the rain, his face grave. He didn't need to say a word. His presence alone told them everything they needed to know. The horse's fate had already been sealed. But neither Julian nor Lily were prepared for what would happen next. The rain fell heavier now, as if the heavens themselves were mourning what was about to happen. Julian's heart hammered in his chest as Greg approached with the somber expression of a man who had already carried out the task he had been assigned. Lily stood frozen, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if holding on to something far beyond just her own body. Her eyes never left Greg, not daring to look away, but her face betrayed the quiet storm of emotions running through her. Desperation, rage, disbelief. "Greg," Julian said, his voice cold and brittle, like a man who had already made a decision he couldn't take back. "You've made sure everything's set, right?" Greg nodded slowly, his face a mask of reluctance. "It's done, sir," he said softly, his words like a dull thud in the air. "The men are on their way. They'll take care of Apollo." Julian turned his back to Greg, his gaze fixed on Lily, who stood just feet away, trembling. She wasn't just crying. She was on the edge of breaking. He could see it, the rawness in her eyes, the tremor in her lips, the way her hands gripped her coat like it was the last thing tethering her to sanity. "You can't do this," Lily said, her voice quivering but defiant. "Please, Dad, don't do this to me. I don't care what you think. I need Apollo, and I need him now more than ever." Her voice cracked as she spoke, but there was fire in her eyes. Julian's pulse quickened, but it wasn't anger that surged in him now. It was guilt. Deep, gnawing guilt. He had crossed a line. Somewhere in the fog of his anger and frustration, he had allowed himself to believe that by destroying the one thing Lily cared for, he could somehow fix everything. Fix her, fix himself, and fix the damage that had been done. But he was wrong. So wrong. But it wasn't too late yet. Julian turned to Greg, his mind now spinning with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out. "Stop it," he said, his voice rough. "Call them back. Tell them it's off. This is wrong. I can't go through with it." Greg didn't move. The assistant simply stared at Julian for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're sure about that, sir?" Greg's voice was heavy with the weight of his words. "The men are already on their way. You can't just—" "I don't care," Julian interrupted, his voice rising. He turned back to Lily, his hands shaking. "I'm not doing this. I won't. Apollo stays. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lily." Lily's eyes widened, the surprise evident in her tear-streaked face. She didn't speak for a moment, as though processing what her father had just said. The hope that flickered in her gaze was nearly enough to shatter Julian's resolve all over again. But then the sound of distant tires grew louder, and Lily's face faltered. Julian looked up to see a dark car pulling into the driveway, headlights cutting through the rain like knives. Greg's expression darkened. "They're here," he said quietly, the words like an unwanted prophecy. "No," Julian whispered, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "No, I won't let this happen. I'll stop it. Before Julian could finish, the car's engine cut off, and the door slammed. He watched in frozen disbelief as two men in dark raincoats stepped out of the car, their faces shadowed beneath hoods. Julian's mind went into overdrive, but he didn't move. He couldn't. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. The men approached, their boots crunching against the gravel as they neared the stable. One of them was holding a heavy tool bag, the faint outline of a rifle visible under his coat. "No," Lily whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, but there was no denying the fear in her voice. Julian's entire body trembled as the two men approached the stable door. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time, Julian understood the depth of what he was about to lose. Not just the horse, but his daughter. Her trust, her love, her faith in him. But before the men could reach the stall where Apollo stood, Julian moved, his legs carrying him faster than he had ever run. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice raw and desperate. "Stop! You can't!" The men froze, staring at him as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Julian stood there, panting, his heart in his throat. "I said stop," he repeated, louder now, his hands shaking. Lily moved slowly toward him, her eyes locked on his. She seemed so small in the rain, standing against the storm both outside and within, but she wasn't afraid anymore, not of him. "You're making a mistake, Dad," she said softly. "You're making a huge mistake." The words cut through him like a blade. He turned to the two men, his voice trembling but firm. "You can't do it. I'm canceling the order. The horse is staying. Do you hear me? It's staying." The men exchanged a look, confusion on their faces. The one holding the rifle stepped forward, but Greg, who had been standing silently in the background, raised a hand to stop him. "Mr. Westbrook's decision is final," Greg said. "It's over." The men stood still for a moment, then slowly backed away, retreating to their car without a word. As the car pulled away, Julian collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged, his body shaking as if the storm inside him had finally been released. Lily was by his side in an instant, her arms around him. They sat there in the rain, the world around them still, quiet and broken. And for the first time in months, Julian felt like he was finally ready to rebuild. Not his empire, not his wealth, but the bond with his daughter. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start healing. The morning after the storm had passed, the Westbrook mansion was eerily quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, like the earth was holding its breath. Inside, Julian sat in his study, staring blankly at the papers scattered across his desk. His mind was far from the numbers, contracts, and emails that usually consumed him. Instead, his thoughts were with Lily, with Apollo, and with everything that had nearly fallen apart the night before. He could still see her face, the shock, the anger, the hurt, as she watched him call off the order. But there had been something else in her eyes, something that he couldn't quite put into words. Relief, hope, and maybe even a tiny spark of trust. But that spark felt fragile. Too fragile. The knock on the door startled him. "Come in," he called, his voice low and hoarse from the emotions he'd been trying to bury since the night before. It was Greg, looking as calm and composed as ever, but Julian could see the tension in his posture, the same tension that had been in his own muscles all night, the tightness that hadn't loosened since he'd made the decision to stop the sacrifice. "I've spoken to the men," Greg said, his tone neutral. "They're not happy about being called off, but they understand the change in orders. I've also taken care of the paperwork for the private security we discussed, just in case." Julian didn't reply right away. He was too lost in his own thoughts to focus on business. The cost of the horse, the security, the secrecy, it all seemed so trivial now. None of it mattered in the face of what he had nearly done to his daughter. "I'm sure you've already noticed, but things aren't exactly stable," Greg continued, his voice carrying a hint of concern. "Your relationship with Lily, it's fragile. She may never forgive you for what you tried to do. I'm just saying, sir, there's still a lot of ground to make up." Julian's heart sank. He had been so focused on controlling everything, on fixing the wreckage of his own life, that he hadn't stopped to consider how deep the wound had cut. Greg's words hit home harder than he cared to admit. "I know," Julian muttered. "I know, I thought I was helping her. I thought I was fixing things, but I was wrong." Greg's gaze softened just for a moment. "You can still fix it, sir, but it's going to take time. A lot of time." The words were a reminder of something Julian didn't want to hear. Time. Time was something he had never been good at giving, especially to people. He was used to making quick, decisive decisions, not waiting for the slow, painful process of healing. "Thanks, Greg," Julian said, his voice distant. "You can leave now." Greg gave a short nod and walked out of the room, leaving Julian alone with his thoughts once again. He stared out the window for what felt like hours, watching the lush greenery of the estate sway in the breeze. The sound of the wind through the trees was soothing, almost comforting. But there was no peace for him, no comfort in the beauty around him. He had shattered something important. He had broken his daughter's trust. And no amount of money, no amount of control could fix that. Lily hadn't come to speak to him yet. After the events of the previous night, Julian had expected some kind of confrontation, some kind of breakdown or emotional outpouring. But there was nothing. Just silence. He knew she was in the stables, tending to Apollo. But every time he tried to go to her to apologize, the words stuck in his throat. He didn't know how to approach her, how to make things right. He had been so blind to her pain that now, even with everything in him, he couldn't figure out how to heal the rift between them. But then, as he paced the hallway, his thoughts interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps, he stopped. He didn't have to turn around to know who it was. "Lily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't speak at first. He heard her approach him slowly, each step filled with hesitation. Her presence, once a source of comfort for him, now seemed like a chasm between them. "Dad," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual, almost distant. "We need to talk." Julian nodded, his throat tight. "I know. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake." Lily didn't respond right away. Instead, she simply stood there, her arms folded, her eyes fixed on the ground. When she finally looked up at him, there was no anger, no fury in her expression, just a quiet sadness. "You don't get it, do you?" she asked softly. It wasn't just about Apollo, it was about everything. You didn't even try to understand what I needed. What I've been through. Her words hit Julian like a wave crashing over him. The truth was raw, unrelenting, and it made him feel smaller than he ever had in his life. "I tried," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was helping you. I thought if I could take away the one thing that was keeping you from moving on—" "You don't get it," she interrupted, her voice rising, but not with anger, just with frustration. "You can't just take things away and expect me to heal. You can't just fix it by controlling everything around you. I've lost enough. You can't take Apollo from me, too." There it was. The truth. The reality he had been avoiding. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, his voice cracking. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry for everything. I should have listened." Lily looked at him for a long moment before she sighed, the breath shaky and heavy. "It's not about what you say, Dad. It's about showing me you're here, that you're not trying to fix me, that you're just here with me. You don't have to fix everything, just be with me." The silence between them stretched, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came with a fragile understanding, a small but significant shift in their relationship. "I'm here," Julian finally said, his voice steady now, "and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Lily nodded, her eyes softening. For the first time in a long time, Julian felt like they were on the same page. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fixed, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. The days after Julian's promise were slow, a kind of painful rebuilding. The house, once filled with the noise of constant business and servants running errands, now echoed with silence. But it wasn't the quiet of peace, it was the stillness of uncertainty. Every word Julian spoke to Lily felt weighted, every gesture filled with unspoken meaning. There was no easy fix for the years of distance, for the mistake he had made. But he was trying, that much was clear. Apollo had been kept safely in the stables, a constant reminder of the fragility of their family. Julian spent his mornings sitting in the large plush office chair, hands folded, staring out over the estate. His eyes would occasionally flicker over to the barn where Lily was. She still refused to speak much to him, but she was spending more time with Apollo, brushing him, feeding him, whispering to him as if the horse were her only friend, but nothing felt right. The weight of the past few days was like a storm cloud hovering just above him, always threatening to break, and in the back of his mind, the shadow of that dark deal, made in a fit of rage, still loomed. That evening, the house was still. Julian had finally convinced Lily to join him for dinner. She was reluctant at first, but he had promised to make her favorite: steak, mashed potatoes, and a simple salad. They ate in silence, the only sound coming from the gentle clink of silverware on porcelain. Julian watched her, her movements precise but distant. She didn't look at him much, and he could tell her mind wasn't with him. It was with Apollo. Always with Apollo. "You've been spending a lot of time with him," Julian finally said, breaking the silence. Lily looked up from her plate, her eyes guarded. "He's the only one who understands me," she replied softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You think I didn't notice what you almost did? What you almost let happen? You think that was just about the horse?" Her words stung, each one a sharp reminder of his failure. Julian set his fork down, his throat tight. "Lily, I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I can't take back what happened, but please believe me when I say I'm trying. I'm trying to fix this. To fix me." "You can't fix me, Dad," Lily said, her eyes flicking to the window. "I don't need fixing. What I need is trust. I need you to trust me for once." Julian's chest tightened at her words. Trust. It had been so easy to take control of everything around him, to micromanage, to solve problems with his wealth and power. But trust was something that couldn't be bought, something that couldn't be manipulated into existence. It was something he had never truly learned to give. I know, he said softly, and I'm sorry. I'll prove it to you. I will. Lily didn't respond, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Hope? Perhaps. But it was faint, and Julian wasn't sure it would last. Later that night, after the table was cleared and the dishes washed, Julian couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. His mind drifted back to the phone call he had received earlier that afternoon, the one that had set his heart racing. The call had come from his lawyer. There was news. Someone had learned of the failed attempt to have Apollo taken care of, and now that knowledge was out in the open. The threat wasn't just from the men Greg had hired, it was someone within his own circle. Someone who had been close enough to hear whispers of the plan, close enough to use the information against him. At first, Julian had tried to shrug it off. It was a leak, surely. But the more he thought about it, the more his heart raced. This wasn't just a small problem. It was a threat to everything. His company, his wealth, his reputation. As Julian paced around his study, the weight of it all pressed down on him. He couldn't let the truth about Apollo's near fate get out. Not now, not ever. But there was no denying it anymore. The reckoning he had been avoiding was coming. His phone rang again, shattering his thoughts. Julian's hands were shaking as he picked up the receiver. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but calm, almost too calm. "Mr. Westbrook," the voice said, "I hope you're sitting down. I think you should know that the details of your recent transactions have come to light, and unless we come to an understanding, I can't guarantee what might happen next." The voice trailed off, and Julian's blood ran cold. "You wouldn't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You wouldn't dare." A soft chuckle echoed through the line. "Don't be so sure. You've made a lot of enemies, Mr. Westbrook, and I have a feeling your daughter's precious horse is just the beginning." The line went dead, and Julian was left staring at the phone, his mind reeling. His worst fears had come true. The deal, his desperate act of control, hadn't just been about his daughter. It had made him enemies in places he couldn't even begin to understand. The next morning, Julian drove out to the estate in a state of near panic. He had to fix this. He had to protect Lily. He had to protect Apollo. And most of all, he had to make sure nothing could tear his family apart. When he arrived at the stables, the first thing he noticed was the emptiness, the silence. Apollo wasn't in the stable. Lily was nowhere in sight. His heart skipped a beat. The panic swelling in his chest. Where was she? Where was Apollo? He ran through the stable doors, only to stop dead in his tracks when he saw the faintest imprint in the mud outside, the shape of hooves fading in the distance. And that's when it hit him. They were gone. The sun was setting over the estate, casting long shadows across the sprawling grounds. Julian stood on the porch of the Westbrook mansion, his mind a whirl of anxiety and panic. His hands were trembling as he tried to focus, as if the world had tilted just enough to make everything seem out of reach. Apollo was gone. Lily was gone. And the empty space left behind felt like an open wound, raw and bleeding. He had never truly realized how far he had pushed his daughter until now. Until she had disappeared with the one thing in this world that meant more to her than anything. Her horse. The horse he had almost sacrificed for the sake of his own misguided vengeance. Julian's heart raced as his thoughts swirled, trying to form a plan. He couldn't just let her go. He couldn't lose her like this. But in the back of his mind, he knew something darker was at play. It wasn't just about Apollo. This was about control, and someone powerful, had manipulated him into this mess. The sound of a vehicle approaching broke his thoughts. He turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw Greg's truck pull up the long driveway. The man had been a constant in his life for years, a source of stability, someone Julian trusted implicitly. But after everything that had happened, after the threats and the lies, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that even Greg might not be on his side anymore. Greg stepped out of the truck, his face grim. There was no smile, no greeting, just business. "Julian," Greg said, his voice low, "we need to talk." "Where is she, Greg?" Julian demanded, his voice harsh with fear. "Where's Lily? Where's Apollo?" Greg hesitated, looking away for a brief moment. "I don't know where they are," he said slowly, "but I've got some information that might help. I didn't want to say anything before, but now it's too big to ignore." Julian's chest tightened. "What do you mean? Who's behind this? Who knows about the deal?" Greg hesitated, a moment of conflict crossing his face. Then he stepped forward, lowering his voice even further. "It's not just a leak, Julian. The person behind this is someone close to you, someone you trust. And if we don't move fast, they're going to make sure you lose everything." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you saying? The threat is bigger than you realize. Someone who knew about Apollo, about what you were planning to do, is using that knowledge against you. And if you don't act now, everything you've built will come crashing down." Julian shook his head in disbelief. He couldn't fathom it. He had trusted Greg with his life, his family. But now, it felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling. "Who?" he whispered. "Who's behind this?" Greg's face darkened and his eyes narrowed. "It's Richard Westbrook, your brother." The name hit Julian like a slap to the face. Richard, his older brother. The one person he had always kept at arm's length. The person whose ambition had always made Julian uneasy. Richard had been a shadow in the background for years. Quiet, calculating, always watching. Julian had never fully trusted him, but this was a betrayal on a scale he couldn't have predicted. "Richard," Julian repeated, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. "He's been working against me this whole time?" Greg nodded grimly. "He's been pulling strings for a while now. He knows everything about your business, about Lily, about Apollo, and he's using it all against you. He's the one who leaked the information. He's the one who manipulated you into taking that extreme step with Apollo. And now, he's using Lily as leverage to get what he wants." Julian's mind raced. He thought about all the times Richard had quietly stood on the sidelines, offering advice that always seemed too good to be true. Every time Julian had trusted him, every time he had let his guard down, Richard had been quietly gathering power, waiting for the right moment to strike. "I have to find her," Julian said, his voice thick with the determination. "I can't let him win." "I'll help you," Greg said, his tone firm, "but you need to act fast. If Richard gets his hands on Apollo, or worse, if he's using Lily as bait, there's no telling what he'll do." Julian didn't need to hear any more. His heart pounded in his chest, and every muscle in his body was on alert. Richard had crossed a line, and Julian wouldn't let him tear his family apart. "We'll get him back," Julian said, more to himself than to Greg. "We'll get 'em both back." The search began in earnest that night. Julian and Greg scoured the estate, questioning everyone, checking every corner, every hiding place they could think of. But it wasn't until the early hours of the morning that they finally found a clue. A small, handwritten note left on the desk in Julian's study. It was simple, but it sent a chill down his spine. "If you want to see them again, you'll come alone. The barn. Midnight. Don't bring anyone else." Julian's hands trembled as he read the note. He didn't need Greg's confirmation. He knew exactly who had written it. Richard. And he knew exactly what he had to do. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Julian stood, staring at the note, his mind focused entirely on what lay ahead. There was no turning back now. No more mistakes. If he was going to save his daughter and his horse, he would have to confront the man who had spent his entire life plotting against him, and this time he would not let Richard win. The barn was eerily quiet as Julian approached it under the pale light of the moon. The sound of his footsteps on the gravel was muffled, drowned out by the heavy thudding of his heart in his chest. The note had been clear. Come alone, no backup, no distractions. Richard wanted this to be personal. Julian paused just outside the barn doors. His mind was a storm, swirling with every possible outcome, every scenario. He had already lost so much. His daughter, his trust in his own decisions, his relationship with Apollo. But he wasn't about to lose everything. Not like this, not to Richard. He stepped into the barn, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The wooden beams creaked above him, and the scent of hay and fresh straw filled the air. In the far corner, silhouetted against the weak light, was Richard, standing like a figure from a nightmare. Julian's voice broke the silence. It's over, Richard. Let them go. Richard turned slowly, a smirk playing at the edges of his lips. Oh, Julian, always so predictable. You never did learn how to play the game. The two brothers stood facing each other, the years of resentment and rivalry between them now tangible, pressing down on Julian's shoulders like a weight. He had always known Richard was dangerous, but now, seeing him here, so close, the full extent of his brother's malice was undeniable. Why? Julian asked, his voice strained. Why destroy everything I've built? Why use Lily and Apollo to get back at me? Richard's laugh echoed in the barn. Destroy everything you've built? No, Julian. I'm not destroying anything. I'm taking what's rightfully mine. You always took everything. Our father's company, our inheritance, even our mother's attention. It was always about you, wasn't it? Always about being the golden child. Well, now it's my turn. Julian's fists clenched. You think this is about power, about money, this is about family. You're tearing us apart, Richard. For what? To satisfy your ego? Richard took a step forward, his face hardening. I've waited long enough. I gave you every chance to hand over control of the company, to step aside, but you never did. You always had to be the one in charge. Now, it's my turn to take it all. Julian's breath caught in his throat. Richard wasn't just after the company. He was after everything. And if he was willing to go this far to use his own niece and Apollo as pawns, there was no telling what he might do next. Lily's voice suddenly cut through the tension. Dad, stop! Julian's heart lurched in his chest. He spun around to see Lily standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined. She was holding Apollo's reins, the horse standing beside her looking calm, as if he knew this moment would come. I told you not to bring anyone else, Richard hissed, his eyes flashing with anger. I don't care, Lily shot back, her voice steady despite the situation. You don't get to control us anymore. Julian felt a surge of relief and pride. His daughter had come for him, had come for them. Apollo, her protector, her anchor, stood at her side, as strong and unwavering as ever. Richard took a step back, his eyes narrowing. You're making a mistake, Lily. You don't understand. This is how it has to be. No, Richard, Julian said, his voice firm, finally standing tall after years of being dominated by his brother's schemes. This is how it ends. There was a long, tense silence. The weight of everything. The years of manipulation, the broken trust, the pain of their family's fracture hung in the air. But as Julian looked at his daughter, standing strong, he knew that it wasn't too late to change everything. "You won't win," Julian said, his voice unwavering. Richard's eyes flickered with something dark. For a moment, Julian thought his brother might lunge at him, might try to do something drastic. But then Richard just stood there, his jaw clenched tight. The smirk that had once been so confident now looked more like a grimace. "Fine," Richard spat, taking one last look at them. "But don't think this is over. I will make sure you regret this, Julian. You can't keep me out of the family business forever." With that, Richard turned and stormed out of the barn, leaving them in the stillness of the night. Lily ran to Julian, throwing her arms around him. He held her tightly, feeling the weight of everything they had just survived. The nightmare wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, Julian believed they might actually have a chance. He looked at Apollo, who nickered softly, as if understanding the moment of triumph. "You did it, Dad," Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We did it." Julian nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "No, Lily. You did it. You showed me what really matters. Not power, not money, family." And for the first time in years, Julian understood. He had been blind, thinking that control and power would fix everything. But the truth was, it was love, trust, and loyalty that had the power to heal. They had fought together. They had won together. And as they stood there in the quiet barn, surrounded by the remnants of their fractured family, Julian finally understood what it meant to truly be a father. They were free. For now, at least. If you were moved by this story of family, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that no matter how deep the betrayal, love, and trust can always bring us back together. Stay tuned for more powerful stories like this one.
The river always takes more than it gives. He stood at its edge, boots soaked in mud, cigarette trembling between his fingers, watching the current churn like a restless ghost. Somewhere behind the trees, a thunderstorm cracked the sky open. He didn't flinch. He'd been numb for months. That's when he saw it. A German shepherd, soaked to the bone, limping out of the treeline. No collar, no leash, just a wild, haunted look in its eyes and something clamped between its teeth. It dropped the item at his feet, red cloth torn and drenched. It was a hoodie, a child's hoodie. He froze. Then the dog barked once, sharp, desperate. It spun around and sprinted back toward the woods. He didn't think. He just ran after it. Branches clawed at his arms. Thorns bit through his jeans. The dog didn't stop. It howled like it was dragging him through time itself. The deeper they went, the more his heart clawed at his chest. Something in his gut already knew. This wasn't just a dog. This wasn't just a hoodie. This was connected. This was personal. He crashed through a clearing and skidded to a halt. The dog stood beside a shallow patch of riverbank, whining now, pawing at the edge. Something shimmered in the mud. He dropped to his knees and dug with bare hands. It was a phone, caked in dirt. Screen cracked, but still on. Recording. He picked it up, thumb trembling. The screen flickered. A video played. Rain. Footsteps. A girl's voice. She was crying. His breath stopped cold. He knew that voice. No, it couldn't be. A name flashed on the screen. First as the file name, then in the shaky voice of the girl whispering it into the dark, as if she knew this might be the last thing she'd ever say. "Dad!" He staggered back like he'd been punched. The phone dropped. The mud swallowed it whole again. His lungs couldn't find air. 6 months. 6 months since the search ended. Since they blamed him. Since she disappeared without a trace. Since her mother changed the locks. Since the guilt swallowed him whole. The dog growled low and nudged his leg. snapping him out of the spiral. It looked at him, then back toward the trees. And it barked again, commanding, demanding. It wanted him to follow. His legs didn't want to move, but something deeper, older, instinct maybe, or guilt, pushed him forward. They moved fast now. The forest shifted. The sky roared. The path darkened. And then, ahead, nailed to a dying tree, a small pink flyer flapped in the wind. It was sun-bleached, torn at the corners. But he didn't need to read it. He already knew the face printed on it. Missing. 16 years old. Blue eyes. Red hoodie. Last seen walking home from school. The day after their final fight. He touched the flyer. It was damp, like it had just been posted, not 6 months old. His hand trembled. Then the dog barked again, this time not forward, but to the side. It was staring at the base of a tree, digging, fast. He knelt beside it, brushing aside wet leaves and earth. That's when he saw the scratches, claw marks, maybe, or something desperate, something human. There were initials carved into the bark. His daughter's, and below them a single word. Help! He blinked, not realizing the tears until they hit his hands. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Then he heard it, a noise deeper in the forest. Not an animal, not thunder, a voice, a scream, then silence. And the dog was already running again. Before his mind could catch up, his feet followed. Because something told him the truth wasn't buried 6 months ago. It was still alive, waiting to be found. The trail twisted through the trees like a scar no one wanted to admit was there. Mud clung to his boots, rain sliced sideways, and branches tore at his face like claws. But the dog didn't stop. Not once. It moved with purpose, every step a warning, every bark a demand. Follow. Now. He kept seeing the hoodie in his mind. Torn. Red. The last thing she was wearing. The same one he yelled at her about when she walked out the door. Too cold for that, he'd snapped. She rolled her eyes, slammed the door, and never came back. And now here it was, drenched and rotting in the woods like a ghost of that argument. Mocking him. The dog led him to a clearing ringed with pine. Dead silence. Then it trotted to a tree and began to scratch. He followed, knelt beside it, and brushed away the wet leaves. There, half buried in the mud, was a sketchbook. The cover was cracked and peeling, the edges warped from water. He opened it. Childlike drawings filled every page, messy but detailed. A red hoodie, a dog, a dark cabin, a shadow with no face. He flipped faster. The drawings changed. Chains. A girl in a corner. The dog breaking through a window. Words scrawled under one image. Don't stop looking. His chest tightened. These weren't just doodles. This was a diary. A cry for help. She'd been alive. She'd tried to fight. He turned the last page. There was a drawing of him. Not smiling. Not proud. Just standing. Arms crossed. Frowning. Watching her walk away. And below it, in shaky letters, I hope you're still looking. He dropped the book like it burned him. His hands shook, rage and guilt tearing through him in waves. He looked up. The dog was already moving again. The rain stopped. The wind held its breath. The forest grew too still. They reached a ridge overlooking a shallow ravine. And there, tangled in vines, a collapsed wooden fence barely holding together a trail. The dog nosed through the gap. He followed. The air felt colder here, older, like the ground remembered things it wanted buried. They came upon a tree stump split in two. The dog circled it, sniffing madly, then began to dig. He helped this time, shoveling with both hands. Minutes passed. Mud coated his arms. Then metal. A small box. Rusted, locked tight. He smashed it against the stump until it cracked open. Inside, photographs. Dozens. Teenagers. Different faces. Different years. Some looked recent. Others, faded. Some had missing posters taped to the back. He froze. His daughter wasn't the first. This wasn't just about her. A black flash drive lay at the bottom. No label, just scratches. He slid it into his pocket. The dog barked, twice sharp and fast. He looked up. The dog stood near a half-buried wooden post, its fur bristling. Carved into the post, a symbol, a circle with a line through it. He didn't recognize it, but something about it made his stomach turn, like he was being watched, judged. That's when he saw the camera, hidden in the tree, old, covered in moss, but the red light blinked. Recording. He grabbed a rock, smashed it until the light died. The dog was already running again. They climbed another ridge, every breath a struggle. Then they saw it. The cabin, half-rotted, windows boarded, door splintered, smoke curling from a chimney. Someone was inside. He crouched behind a tree, heart pounding. The dog growled low, almost whispering. He didn't care anymore. He stepped into the clearing. Each step toward that cabin felt heavier. Not with fear, with memory. She had drawn this place. He saw it in her book. The same door, the same cracked shutters. He reached the porch, hand hovering near the knob. Then he heard it. Music. A girl's voice, singing off-key, broken. From inside, he pushed the door open. Darkness swallowed him. And just as the dog followed, something snapped behind them. Camera flash. A shutter click. Then silence. If you feel this story in your bones, share and subscribe because this isn't over yet. The cabin breathed like it had lungs. Every step he took across the floorboards released a moan, a sigh, a whisper of something that had been waiting too long in the dark. The air smelled like rot and damp wood, like time had curled up in here and died. The dog moved ahead of him, slow now, cautious. It didn't bark. It didn't whine. It just crept forward like it remembered this place too well. The door slammed shut behind them. He spun, heart slamming against his ribs, but no one was there. Only shadows. He forced himself forward. His eyes adjusted. A single lantern flickered in the corner, illuminating a table covered in dust, feathers, and bones. A pair of rusted handcuffs hung from the edge. Something thick and dark had dried on the floorboards beneath. He didn't want to know what. The dog sniffed the air, then bolted toward a small side room. He followed, slower this time. The door was half open. Inside, a mattress on the floor. Torn blankets. A journal, waterlogged and warped, sat beside a crushed bottle of water. He picked it up. The pages stuck together, but he peeled one open. Her handwriting. Shaky. Tight. Day 12, he brings food now, but only if I sing. Day 20, I hear others. Crying through the floor. Day 33, I think the dog's still alive. I hear him barking at night. He knows I'm here. Day 49, he doesn't wear a mask when he thinks I'm too weak to look. I know who he is. His hands shook. He dropped the book. She'd been here. Alive. Alone. Terrified. He turned. The dog was sniffing the floor near the corner, then began pawing at a loose floorboard. He knelt beside it, pulled it up, and nearly dropped it again. Bones. Small ones. A bracelet tangled in the ribcage. He pulled it out. It was pink. Plastic. A name etched in beads. Emily. He'd seen that name before. Years ago. On another flyer. Another missing girl. The dog whined. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a grave. He stood, body shaking. That's when the window shattered. A shotgun blast ripped through the room, missing him by inches. He dropped to the floor as shards of glass rained over him. The dog barked wildly, teeth bared, eyes locked on the trees outside. Another blast. He crawled toward the front door, dragging the dog with him. They tumbled out onto the porch and rolled behind the sidewall. Silence. Then footsteps, crunching through leaves. Closer. He held his breath. The dog growled low. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice. Low. Calm. Familiar. You should have stayed out of this. His blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. But it was impossible. The dog growled louder. Hackles up. He peered around the edge of the cabin. Just trees. Mist curling like fingers. No one there. Then a flash. Movement to the left. He turned. A figure in a hood sprinted through the trees. He gave chase. Branches whipped past him. Rain returned in sheets. The dog surged ahead, faster than him. Then the figure vanished. Gone. He stopped, panting, soaked to the bone. The dog circled a tree, then began barking at a pile of logs. He kicked the logs aside. Camera. Crushed. Still smoking. Whatever footage it had, gone. He fell to his knees, the weight of the storm and the truth pressing down on him. This wasn't a single sick man hiding in the woods. This was a game, a hunt, and he was now a piece on the board. He stood, turned, and froze. A girl's shoe, caught on a branch. Muddy, small. It matched the one from her missing poster. She'd been here recently. Then the dog barked once, sharp. A trail. Fresh footprints. Deep. Running. He looked to the trees, then to the dog. No more hesitation. They ran. Back into the woods. Into the unknown. Because whatever was out there had just made a mistake. It let him live. If your heart's racing like his, share and subscribe because the chase has only just begun. The rain thinned as the trees grew dense again, but the cold stayed, gnawing through his jacket and into his bones. The footprints were fresh, punched deep into the mud like whoever left them was running for their life or hunting. The dog stayed low, ears sharp, nose twitching at every broken branch, every shift in the wind. Neither of them made a sound. They came upon an old fence, broken in two like someone had driven through it years ago. Beyond it sat a forgotten farmland. Overgrown grass, rusted machinery. A barn slumped in on itself like it had given up. In the distance, barely visible through the mist, stood a crooked farmhouse. Curtains twitched in one of the windows. Then stillness. They didn't approach from the front. The dog circled the barn first. Inside, silence. Then a soft clinking sound. He crept in, footsteps silent on rotting wood. The smell hit him first, decay, sweat, and something chemical. In the corner under a tarp, he found it. A table, chains, old photographs pinned to the wall above it. Every face was familiar. Missing kids, girls, boys, years apart, different towns. He backed away slowly. Then something clattered behind him. He turned fast, just hay falling from the loft. But his heart didn't slow. He found a door at the back, leading into a crawlspace under the barn. The dog refused to follow, whining low. He ducked down anyway. It wasn't just storage. Boxes lined the walls, labeled with dates, names, tape peeled from the edges. He opened one. Inside, school books. A cracked phone. A stuffed rabbit missing an eye. Her rabbit. He hadn't seen it since she was 10. Said she didn't need it anymore, but she took it with her when she ran. It was hers. She'd been here. He staggered out, blinking into the light. His chest tightened, every breath a war. Then the barn door slammed shut behind him. Locked. He pounded against it. Nothing. A click above. He looked up just in time to see the flash of a camera lens vanish behind the hayloft. They were watching, still watching. The dog barked outside, frantic. Then silence, and a voice crackled from somewhere overhead. Wrong place, wrong time. Then static. He kicked the door until it splintered. The dog rushed in, circling him, barking toward the farmhouse now. No more waiting. They ran. The front door of the farmhouse was unlocked. Inside, quiet. Too quiet. He moved through the hall, gun in hand now. Found it in the barn, tucked beneath a floorboard. Loaded. Waiting. Almost like someone expected him to find it. He checked each room. Empty. Then he heard it. A voice. Behind the cellar door. He opened it slowly. Wooden steps groaned under his weight. And then he saw her. His daughter. Alive. Chained to a pipe. Weak but alert. Eyes wide with recognition. But she didn't cry out. She shook her head. Silent. Urgent. Don't. It was a trap. He stepped forward, and the floor gave out. He dropped hard, hitting something sharp, then darkness. When he opened his eyes, his wrists were bound. Blood dripped from his temple. The room spun. Across from him, she was there. Closer now. Pale. Bruised. Alive. Her voice was hoarse. You shouldn't have come. The dog barked somewhere above, scratching at floorboards. Then footsteps. Heavy. Slow. coming down the cellar stairs. She turned her head, eyes full of hate. He's here. He's the one who took us. The figure stepped into view, and the world dropped out beneath him again. It wasn't a stranger. It was the sheriff. The man who told him to give up. The man who called off the search. The man who married his ex-wife a month after the case was closed. The man now smiling with a shotgun in his hands. You should have stayed broken. If this caught you off guard, like, share and subscribe because the truth only gets darker from here. The sheriff lowered the shotgun slowly, savoring the look on his face. That cracked mixture of disbelief and fury. Like it wasn't just betrayal, it was the world caving in on itself. The man who once searched beside him, who gave the speeches, who stood in front of cameras saying they'd never stop looking, was the one who silenced them. She spoke first. He's been doing it for years. Her voice was fragile but steady. Rage curled behind her words like smoke behind glass. She'd stopped crying weeks ago. Now she was cold steel. He stared at her, lips cracked, blood drying down the side of his face. Why? The sheriff cocked his head. Like it was a dumb question. Control. Some people drink. Some gamble. I collect secrets. He laughed then, low and hollow. And nothing is quieter than a missing child. The dog barked again upstairs, then a thud. A whimper. Silence. The sheriff's smile widened. That mutt was the only loose end. Funny how it always showed up. Like it wanted to be the hero. He stepped closer. You made this easy. You came running back like a faithful dog yourself. He pressed the shotgun to the man's chest. But you were never meant to find her. She interrupted. I stayed because I knew no one would believe me. She leaned forward, fire in her eyes now. But I kept proof. He hesitated. Just for a second. That flash of doubt. She looked at her father, then flicked her eyes toward the dirt wall behind him. There, buried in the clay, a camera lens, a light still blinking red. You talk too much, she whispered, and the shotgun swung toward her. That's when her father moved. Fast, desperate. He lunged sideways, slamming his shoulder into the sheriff's legs. The shotgun roared. Dust exploded. She ducked, chains rattling. The sheriff hit the ground hard, cursing, but the gun skittered out of reach. Her father scrambled for it, but a boot hit his ribs. The sheriff was up first, face twisted with fury. You don't get to win this. He grabbed a rusted shovel from the wall and raised it high. Then a sound cut through everything. A growl. Low, deep. The dog. It burst down the stairs like a shadow with teeth, eyes glowing with fury. It hit the sheriff mid-strike, jaws snapping onto his arm. The shovel clattered. The man screamed. Blood sprayed. Her father grabbed the shotgun, rolled, aimed. One breath. 1 second. The sheriff froze, eyes wide. And then he ran. Up the stairs. Bleeding. Vanishing into the house. The dog bolted after him. Her father didn't follow. He dropped the gun and went to her. Broke the chains with a steel bar. Held her for the first time in 6 months. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Then footsteps above. Multiple. Voices. He stood, pulled her behind him. But it wasn't the sheriff. It was kids. 4 of them. Dirty. Silent. Some crying. Some too numb to cry. She looked up. I told you. I wasn't the only one. They followed her out of the cellar. Through the ruins of the house. The sheriff was gone. Blood trail cold. The woods swallowed him. The dog returned, limping, one eye nearly swollen shut. It laid down at the girl's feet and sighed like it had carried the world back with it. Sirens came later, flashing lights. The town that gave up now gathered around the wreckage like vultures chasing absolution. But she didn't speak to them. She walked straight past the sheriff's deputies, past the news crews, past the cameras, and into her father's arms. For the first time, she didn't pull away. She just whispered, "You believed me." He whispered back, "I never stopped." The sky turned gold the morning after the storm, like the world had been rinsed clean but still remembered everything. Police tape fluttered from the broken porch. Deputies combed the farmhouse with cameras and gloves, but the ones who mattered had already left. He didn't wait around for the news crews. He didn't need their headlines or apologies. He just walked down the old trail, through the mist-covered woods, with his daughter beside him and the German shepherd at their heels. The same path the dog had carved through mud and memory now felt lighter somehow, like the forest was breathing again. They didn't speak at first. No need. There were no perfect words for what they'd survived. Just steps. Just silence. Just presence. She held the stuffed rabbit close. The same one he'd thought was lost to time. Dirt-stained. Missing an ear, but still whole. Like her. The dog limped beside them, slower now, head low. Every few feet he looked back, checking on them, guarding them. As if the fight wasn't over. As if it never would be. At the river's edge, they stopped. The current was calm now. Nothing like the chaos from before. He crouched and picked up a smooth stone, turned it over in his hand. This was where it started. The dog nosed something in the weeds. A second hoodie. Not red. This one was blue. Smaller. Cleaner. A child's. He opened it. Inside the pocket, photos. Recent. Dozens. Faces. Dates. Locations. Even coordinates. Names of teens no one was looking for yet. His daughter stepped beside him, eyes wide. He's still out there. The sheriff had a network. This wasn't one man hiding a secret. It was something deeper. Systemic. Silent. Rotten. She looked up at her father, and for the first time, she wasn't just the girl who got taken. She was the girl who came back. Stronger. Wiser. Ready. We have to tell them, she said. We have to burn it all down. He didn't answer with words. He just nodded. They walked again. Past the tree with her initials carved in its bark. Past the cabin now guarded by patrol cars. Past the field where buried boxes had names like tombstones. At the edge of the town, the whispers started. People stared. Some stepped forward. Some didn't. But she kept walking. Not a victim anymore. A survivor. At the hospital, she handed over the photos. Spoke to the agents. Named names. Told her story not with fear, but with fire. The tapes were recovered. The camera from the cabin still held audio. Voices. Orders. Patterns. Not just of the sheriff, but others. Lawmen. Businessmen. Men who smiled in public and disappeared kids in private. Took weeks. Arrests. Trials. More names fell. But it started with one dog. A limping, scarred survivor who refused to give up. And one father who finally listened. The day the last arrest was made, they visited the shelter. She knelt beside the shepherd, now resting on a blanket, healing but fading. The vet said he'd lived too long on adrenaline and wounds, that his heart might not last the winter. She ignored them, just stroked his fur. He watched her the whole time, like he always had. You saved me, she whispered. He blinked once, then closed his eyes, and stayed still. Later, they buried him under the same tree where she'd carved her name. She planted wildflowers, said she'd come back every year. Her father stood beside her, silent. Then he pulled something from his coat. The dog's collar. Worn leather. Bent tag. He tied it around the branch above the grave. Let it sway in the wind. Then he knelt. Thank you, he whispered. Not just for saving her, but for giving me back everything I thought I lost. The wind picked up. Leaves rustled. And in that moment, it felt like the woods themselves nodded. Back home, he opened a drawer, pulled out a notebook. Inside, pages already half filled. Maps, notes, faces. He looked at her. Ready? She nodded. Because there were more missing kids. More stories to uncover. More dogs who never gave up. And they weren't done. Not even close. If this story meant something to you, like, share, and subscribe. Because every view helps light the way home for someone still lost.